Welcome to Smart Energy, a podcast where we talk about electrification, home improvement, and clean energy. I'm your host, Andrew Zellner, Editor-in-Chief at Home Connect.
And I'm your co-host, Kelsey Bourgeois, Senior Editor here at Home Connect.
Home Connect is on a mission to rally people to change how and when they use electricity, unlocking clean, affordable, and reliable energy. You can learn more and get paid to conserve energy at homeconnect.com. Thanks for joining me, Kelsey. How's it going?
It's good. We're having a nice chilly day here in Chicago, so I'm a happy girl. How are you?
I'm doing well. I've been thinking a lot about food, and not just because, we worked a little too close to the lunch hour today.
Yes, we did.
But more so thinking about food kind of holistically in terms of our lifestyles and our impact on the world. And previously I was a teenage punk rocker. I was vegetarian and vegan for probably about 15 years. I no longer am, but I've started to think more about it again, and kind of approaching it from a different angle this time.
Yeah, sure. I'm coming from a similar background. I was a yoga instructor for many years. For a portion of that, I was a vegetarian. A portion of that, I was a vegan. Different sort of eating styles throughout then. I also eat meat now. But I feel the same way. I'm sort of reinvestigating that relationship and thinking through it, as you said, in a more holistic way, right? So you started to become just pause there. You're freezing a little bit for me. Sorry.
So you can keep going if I'm freezing.
Okay. Yeah. So I personally have a really hard time with this aspect of green living or trying to reduce my carbon footprint. The reason being I don't like to cook. And so making choices, my partner feeds me and I feel a little bit like beggars can't be choosers.
Mm-hmm.
If someone else is cooking, I feel a little bad then being intense about what they're allowed to cook for me. I don't know. What is your relationship with that like?
So definitely when I stopped being a vegetarian, so like I was really big into New Year's resolutions, and so each New Year I do like a resolution. And one year I just decided I'm going to do a year of meat. Turns out I did that and like never went back. But one of the very quickly, my girlfriend, my wife, and now my wife, fantastic cook, and she was like, "This is so much easier now to like."
Sure.
Cook meals for us, plan meals. And it did seem to make that better. But like at the beginning, I was sort of like very intentional about like, I only want to eat like good meat. I'm not going to go to McDonald's and chow down on a burger that I don't know, where it came from. But as the years have gone on, I can tell
you where it came from if you want to know.
That's maybe a different podcast. But like as the years have gone on, I've also gotten like a little bit lazier about that too.
Yeah.
Also, I'm 38, so like I'm also nearing that like 40-year-old age where health. It's sort of like your last ditch effort to get healthy before you get old, right? And so also thinking about it in terms of like not just my own carbon footprint, but potentially having a healthier diet. I will say being a vegetarian as a 15-year-old in, the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, I won't say my diet was healthy by any means. It was still a lot of bread, a lot of cheese, as a vegetarian. Going vegan was like almost impossible.
I'm sure. Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I think you hit a few of the reasons that people might choose to be vegan or vegetarian, right? There's sort of three big buckets in my mind. There's, the empathetic piece of it where you just love animals and you don't feel good about eating animals or animal products, perhaps. That's one piece. Another piece would be, like you said, perhaps a health benefit. That one, the science on that is it's a little foggy and not in my area of expertise. But the third that I think is most relevant here is changing the way that you eat for the environment, right? We know that food production is a huge part of our carbon emissions. And in particular, I think meat comes up a lot in that conversation, right?
Yeah.
But what I would love is to also introduce some complexity around other foods, because sometimes we simplify that down and think, well, if I don't eat meat, then I'm doing the best for the planet. And that may be true. That might be right. It really depends. But I would love to kind of broaden the conversation to thinking about sustainable foods in general. Because some of the replacement products we use to replace meat products sometimes are not terribly sustainable crops. And then
Mm-hmm.
that introduces an extra layer of complexity. So, or maybe they can't be grown locally or whatever. So it's a complex issue, is I guess what I'm saying.
Well, and especially when you're thinking about carbon footprint, it's not just, you making that food on hopefully your induction range, right?
Right.
It's how that food gets to your house, where the food comes from. Like we don't all live next to farms. They're so like also the idea that a cow slaughtered and butchered locally from like a local farm potentially has a lower carbon footprint than a manufactured, processed product that, came across the entire country.
Right, across the country or from a different country, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a complex calculation, and I think it's worth thinking about. And particularly, I think the easiest or like the quickest hit, if we're thinking about the highest yield thing to do with your diet for the environment, is probably just to reduce the amount, particularly of red meat. We know that raising cattle is the most environmentally taxing thing. And a lot of our, the other thing we're seeing, and when you mentioned McDonald's, it made me think of it, but the deforestation that happens so that we can raise our cattle is also a piece of it. So there's a big picture of the life cycle of how we produce that meat. And I think what I like about the approach of just reducing that is it's not super intense, it's not super hard, and it's not super hard line. And I
Mm-hmm.
really like habit changes that are small and sustainable versus really intense and really rigid personally. So, there's this one trend you've probably heard of that's like meatless Mondays. How about you just do one day where you don't eat meat, which is great. That's
Mm-hmm.
a step in the right direction. And maybe you broaden your palate, you get more vegetables. Like that can't hurt.
Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about too is just the idea that like maybe like we don't prepare meat at home. Maybe it's like a thing we get when we eat out.
Sure.
Um, and I think also too from like just like a budget perspective, uh, good non-meat products are more inexpensive than good meat products.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I will say, I'll also mention the Beyond products and other sort of meat replacement products, right? There's the
Mm-hmm.
there's the vegetable based products that are meant to be like meat, like the fake sausage patties, which I actually love.
Yes.
And then there are this new class of things that are lab grown meat, which is really interesting, and I'm very interested to see where that market goes. I've not done a whole lot of research into the carbon footprint of it, but knowing that just cows existing is part of their greenhouse gas emission, it seems like it probably is better.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the United States probably, has an outsized impact on the carbon emissions specifically from meat. Where, we have a long beef history
We
in the United
do.
States.
We do.
Um,
We wrote an article last week about a new study came out saying that 50% of the meat in this country is actually consumed by just 12% of the people in our country. So it's also disproportionate who's consuming meat, which is interesting.
um, but when we think about the carbon footprint of a different diet, um, what are kind of like some other things we should be thinking about or maybe trying as part of like a habit change?
Yeah, we sort of touched on it earlier, but I think the transportation of food is a lot bigger than we realize, particularly when we're transporting items that need to be refrigerated along the way,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So I think this is one of the reasons there's been a push in recent years to quote unquote buy local, right?
Hmm.
And that's not always possible. It depends where you live. You were joking about me earlier. I'm so lucky. I've got 2 urban farms on my block. So, but that doesn't cover all my produce needs, right? But if you think about it, if you can get any food locally, especially in the summertime here in the US, a lot of that's going to be mostly possible in the summer. That's fabulous, no matter what kind of food it is, right? To just take out the piece of transporting that food around.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would consider is the backside of that, which is food waste. So if we're not careful with the food that we buy, it spoils, it's no longer safe to eat, and then it goes into a landfill. And that actually creates a lot of methane, and that's bad news. So there's a couple things you can do. We have a lot of advice on the blog about how to reduce your food waste. But the other thing is, if it does spoil, I would really recommend that folks investigate composting. Then you don't have to buy your compost. Also, is the side benefit of that is you're creating that at home, and you can also join in with your neighbors. We have that in my neighborhood, like a neighborhood compost big thing that we all kind of contribute to, which is maybe unique for me, but I think you could do it in other neighborhoods. I don't know.
Yeah, the city of Minneapolis actually we have a compost can that we get to put out with
Wow.
our trash every week.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that. Chicago does not have that, but we should.
Yeah, I mean it's I would say the adoption is not great. My
Sure.
can is one of a couple on our block.
Sure.
But it also the other cool thing about composting is that it makes your trash smell less bad. Once we started composting, our trash can was unfortunately mostly just plastic and packaging from food items specifically. But it lasted longer because we didn't have to take it out because it didn't smell bad.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really considered that aspect, but you're right. That's why we take it out so often, and also why it's so full a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
Also, fruit flies, I get, inordinately upset about them. So that also helps, when we have our good compost thing with the charcoal cover over it that keeps the fruit flies in, that helps a lot.
Yeah. And I do think the point about eating locally is one that we don't you don't have to think about really anymore. But even if you go back 30 or 40 years, folks ate the fruits and vegetables that were in season. And when there weren't any in season, you had, sort of bland, terrible meals. But that's also sort of the key to unlocking good food is to eat it when it's in season and available to you locally and as fresh from the field as possible.
That is such a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Obviously, you and I are both in our 30s, so that would have been, not before our awareness, but
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense that it's a newer thing. And particularly all the packaged foods and the things, whatever. I don't know that I could accurately name, besides what's grown here in front of my face on my blog, I don't know that I could accurately name what's in season when. It's making me realize that just learning that could probably go a long way towards, one, like you said, better food, because when it's in season, it's tastier, right? We all, an August tomato is just better than a February tomato. That's just true. But also just thinking about, okay, if I buy this in season, it's more likely to have been grown nearer to me than further, without having to do the legwork of where did this exact banana get grown. Bananas are a bad example, but
so I think we should also touch on in the vegetarian vegan conversation, milk and milk alternatives.
This is what was coming to mind when I said it's more complicated because, well, one, I'm lactose intolerant, so this girlie can't have her milk, but also, some of the milk alternatives are not so environmentally friendly, unfortunately. Is that what you were thinking about?
Well, I was thinking specifically about almonds and almond production and almond milk. So I am not lactose intolerant, but I have a nut allergy.
Oh, no.
And so almond milk is terrible for me.
Yes. So what do you eat? Drink?
I mean, I just regular milk.
Just regular milk, yeah.
And the other thing is I think we both grew up in a time where our parents just poured milk down our throats because they were afraid our bones were going to turn to dust, right? And
well, the 90s Got Milk campaign was effective.
Yeah, and that's not actually the case.
Right.
And so obsessing over like getting milk into a human is not a great thing. But I love having some half and half in my coffee. I love getting like a latte. And it's like it's pretty cool now to be able to go into a coffee shop and I don't know, you've got like a dozen different choices of milks and
Yes.
like yeah, it like makes things more complicated. But I think the point is that like just because it doesn't contain animal products doesn't necessarily mean it's better for the environment.
That's exactly right. And I think it's just worth introducing that nuance into the conversation because I think the less rigid we are with one another about that, the more curious we can get. And I think
Mm-hmm.
curiosity is a lot more likely to lead to sustainable life changes that improve our environment. So I like the conversation of, okay, which if I'm making my milk decision based on the environment, what does that look like, right?
Yeah.
And doing that research there. Um, and I agree with you on the calcium front as well. It's definitely more important for women, but milk's not really the way to do that. There's calcium in a lot of items. Um, yeah.
So thinking about sustainable choices, our guest this week is Cooper Marcus. He's CEO of QuitCarbon. And we had a fantastic conversation all about electrification and habit changes from top to bottom. Our guest today is Cooper Marcus. He's the CEO of QuitCarbon. QuitCarbon makes it simple to leave fossil fuels behind with free guidance through whole home electrification. Cooper, thanks for joining me.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Andrew.
So, Cooper, you're the CEO and founder, QuitCarbon. Tell me a little bit more about what you do.
Sure. Well, my most official title is Chief Quitter. And what I do, what we do, is make it easier, better, cheaper, happier, faster for folks to upgrade their homes off of fossil fuels. We are challenged here as individuals, as a society, as a planetary race by the difficulties of the climate crisis. And for a long time, me and I think a lot of other people kind of felt like the solutions were elsewhere, right? They were things that governments did, that big businesses did,
Mm-hmm.
that happened in, I don't know, conferences in Geneva. Uh, but really now we've gotten to the point where individuals making choices about their homes and their cars can and will make a huge difference to climate change. And huge bonus, when they make those choices, they also end up with better homes,
Mm-hmm.
better experiences of their home life, lower bills, more comfortable homes, more valuable homes, homes that are safer for their kids and their communities. It's just an amazing time to be in this space because it's about the future for everybody being better, but also your future, my future, your future, Andrew, each of our
Mm-hmm.
individual futures also being better. And what a treat it is that we get that sort of bonus, right? That by helping ourselves, we help everybody, or vice versa. And my job is to help more folks make these changes in their homes and feel happier about those changes so that they tell their friends how great it was, and we get yet more folks quitting fossil fuels.
And so you sort of start with somebody expresses interest in electrification, and you sort of do you call it like pre-qualifying or like giving like are you putting together a plan and then all the way through connecting them with the right contractors and helping
Yeah.
with any rebates or uh, that sort of stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a few steps. Certainly, there's a lot of complexity that we take care of that before we existed, individual homeowners and contractors had to navigate on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And that complexity and challenge and difficulty was really a key reason why there hasn't been enough electrification happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will point out before we dive into this that the technology itself is available, is ready to go. We're not talking about weird, bleeding edge, unreliable, strange new tech, right?
Right.
We're talking about boring stuff that is the norm in the rest of the world. I mean, heck, Scandinavia, it's a cold place. You might have heard.
Yeah.
A lot of people in Scandinavia heat their homes with heat pumps. In Asia, you've probably seen the big skyscrapers festooned with compressors on the outside. Those are heat pumps. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
mostly do air conditioning because they don't need heating for the most part, but those are heat pumps too, right? We here in America, and especially where I am here in California, we're just a bit behind the times. So fundamentally, we're helping people catch up with what a lot of the rest of the world has already discovered, that you really can live better electrically. And so where it starts is with your home. Each home is different. Each family is different. The appliances in the home, their age and their configuration, they're all different. What we do, what QuitCarbon does to start with, is we learn quickly about you and your family and your home and your appliances and your priorities. We're going to ask you some questions on our website, and we'll always invite you to have a video call with us, like you and I are doing right here, Andrew,
Mm-hmm.
where my colleagues will check in with you about some details on your home that maybe we haven't yet collected, and also just get a sense of what are your priorities, what's important for you, and also maybe what's not important for you. Um, we'll also ask you to grant us access to your utility data so that we can analyze how your home has been using gas and electricity in the past. But some folks are new in their homes, they don't have any data history. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes we'll ask for a few photos of some of your appliances, maybe your circuit breaker panel. But again, often these are sort of optional. They help us, but not strictly required. We need to get enough information to then generate a plan, a roadmap, guidance for you and your home uh, as it exists today. And we present that to you as quickly as we can. We bring it to you as quickly as we can. But I want to highlight that it's not static, right? That's where
Mm-hmm.
we started. That's today's roadmap. But the world of electrification, though it's sort of familiar and even maybe a little boring in other parts of the world, is really pretty dynamic here in the United States. You know, we have new rebates becoming available. We have contractors becoming more informed, and we have new ways that utilities are thinking about electrification and their utility rate plans. We have new ways that solar is being treated. We're mostly in
Mm-hmm.
this situation here not talking about solar, but once you convert your gas appliances to electric, it can make a lot more sense to think about solar. And solar is changing as well due to new
Yeah.
rules and new technology, all those things, right? So we start by making you a roadmap, and then we keep it up to date going forward as the world changes. But this roadmap is really the kind of the guiding document, the guidance that helps each individual family understand what their priorities are, what projects they'll do, in which order, what they'll cost, what sort of rebates and benefits they can expect, like lower bills and more comfortable homes and safer kitchens for their kids, those sorts of things.
And I think too, there's been a lot of fanfare around the Inflation Reduction Act. It is a once in a lifetime climate funding bill, but there's also, it's overwhelming. I don't know how many pages it is, but it's hundreds, maybe thousands of pages, and there are like so many things homeowners can do or should do. And it's like, and like you said, every home is unique. Every home in America is essentially a custom home.
Yeah.
Um, are there sort of like an order of operation somebody should be thinking about electrification? Do you so I live in Minnesota. A lot of I feel very Scandinavian in that, like, it gets very cold here. I've got a big gas furnace sitting next to me in the basement. It costs so much money to heat during the
Yeah.
winter, and like, but pricing out heat pumps, there's like the initial cost, there's like potential rebates, there's the fact that I only have 100 amps in my electric panel. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are all these considerations. Like what's sort of like a how should a homeowner be thinking about like the order in which to do things?
Yeah. Great. Great. Um, the number one priority when you're not in an emergency, and we'll come back to that in a
Yeah.
moment, is that you should start with a plan. you should start with a roadmap with an assessment. Starting by calling a contractor tends to produce not ideal results. And the reason is that contractors, let's be clear, like they are our friends, ours at QuitCarbon, but also everybody listening to this. Contractors are how we are going to electrify everybody. Contractors are going to do lots of great work in lots of garages and basements. They're going to turn lots of wrenches. And they're going to get those gas appliances replaced with electric ones. And they're really good. Contractors are really good at their trades, right? If you're a plumber, you're good at plumbing. The challenge with home electrification is that all your different appliances connect to your electrical system. And in doing so, they interact, right? You just mentioned, Andrew, you've got 100 amps on your panel. So you already know a bit about this topic. And you know that 100 amps might be considered not quite enough to fully electrify everything in your home. Well, if you call a plumber and say, I'd like a heat pump water heater, please, you might get one. Hopefully they don't try to talk you out of it. But what is likely to happen is they'll put in one that's maybe a bit too big, uses a bit too many amps, maybe is a bit oversized for your family's needs, because why not? They're just doing the water heater, right? That's their trade, that's their specialty. Totally get it, right? The way we help make sure that electrification goes well for all of the appliances in your home and over time, as we're considering technology and rebates changing and all that stuff, is that you start with a plan, right? Just like if you're going to go on a big trip, you'd like to develop an itinerary, or maybe if you're planning for your retirement, it's probably good to have a bit of a financial plan before you start moving your investments around. Well, very similar with home electrification, starting with a plan. And of course, QuitCarbon makes plans for folks for free. And there are other sources of plans. Who knows? By the time this airs, there may be many more versions of QuitCarbon in other places. But there are places, both private and public, utility, nonprofit, government. If you look around in your community and ask around, you'll find somebody that can help you get a plan. And of course, you can always ask QuitCarbon. We actually maintain a list of all the folks who will help you make a plan across the world. We try to have our list be global in scope, and we're always adding new organizations to it. Now, let's talk for a second about emergencies.
Yeah.
The worst time to
that
electrify.
Is often when people are thinking about or having to make decisions about new stuff.
I know. When was the last time you thought about your water heater? Probably it was when you had a cold shower and you're like, what the heck's going on, right?
Yeah.
Electrification really benefits from a little bit of forethought. Having a plan and then following it tends to produce much better results than waiting until you're in a rush. I mean, frankly, that's how a lot of things in life work, right?
Yeah.
Having a plan is better than waiting until you're forced to do the thing. And electrification that's doubly true there. Now, if you're in a hurry, if your water heater is leaking water into your garage or basement or heaven forbid your ceiling, like you need a new one right away, right? Don't delay. But also I encourage you to be firm in your conviction. You can find somebody to electrify your heater, your water heater, your stove in a hurry, just about everywhere already, right? It may not be easy. It probably won't be the first person you'll call. You probably want to reach out to that local organization that helps folks navigate the process of electrifying. You may want to ask them, who do you have that works quick? But increasingly, contractors are in a position to work quick. Just like over the past few decades, they've developed real skill at working quick with gas appliances. If you want a new gas water heater to replace your old one, you can usually get it the same day in most parts of the country.
Yeah.
Heat pump water heaters or heat pumps or induction stoves, it may take a little more effort for you to find the right provider, but you probably can, and I really encourage you to do so. But the best way is avoid the emergency, right? Get that plan and start executing on it. And I want to highlight one little thing about the plan and the timing, which is it's really important that you change the way you're thinking about using things up. I was raised in a family where my mother grew up in the UK in World War II, and very frugal times, right? Everything had to be used precisely as much as possible because there was nothing available. It was wartime, right? So I learned that as a child, and it's been a hard habit for me to shake when it comes to electrifying homes. But let's be clear, gas appliances are not good, right? They're bad for the climate. They cost more to run. They're bad for your local air quality. And if they're inside your home like a gas stove, they're bad for your kids. The
Mm-hmm.
science is clear. They increase the rates of asthma and probably of other health issues inside your homes. There is no good reason to keep using a dangerous machine. Uh,
Right.
and there is no benefit to the climate or to your wallet to using it up, right? If you have a gas machine and you have the ability to electrify it, I encourage you to do so promptly. You'll start receiving the benefits as well as your community sooner. And don't worry, that old gas machine gets recycled. They're full of steel. Steel is easy and valuable to recycle. It's not going to the landfill. It's going to be melted down and turned into a heat pump.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about where it goes.
Um, so the focus on um like appliances and electrification, I think is interesting. Um, so I come from the home building media world, and so like
Mm-hmm.
I'm obsessive about air sealing and insulation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is there a component of this plan that deals with like the envelope of the house?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So in different climate zones, investments in the building envelope have different ways of affecting your outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you are in Minnesota, absolutely. If you're going to electrify, when you are going to electrify, because it is inevitable, sooner or
Yep.
later, everybody's going to do it, right? When you're going to electrify, having your home be well sealed, well insulated beforehand is going to tend to produce a better result. The reason is that if it's well insulated, well sealed, it will lose less heat or cold to the
Mm-hmm.
outside, right? This also counts for places that are hot and you're cooling the inside of your home and you don't want that cool to sort of leak out. Um, you'll have less leakage, which means you'll have lower operating costs for your new heat pump, right? It will use less energy to heat or cool your home because it's wasting less of that energy by, heating or cooling the outside through all the leaks.
Right.
And also, the machine that gets installed in your home, the machine size that we help figure out and that your contractor helps figure out, will probably be a bit smaller, which makes the machine cheaper and potentially makes it less expensive to install. So there's multiple benefits to air sealing and insulation. Now, in mild climates, often the benefits mostly occur in sort of a comfort way. Like your
Mm-hmm.
home is more comfortable. It may not strictly be the precisely best financial investment in mild climates. In anywhere other than coastal climates, it probably does make sense because it's relatively cheap to insulate and air seal, and the benefits to your utility bills and the lower cost machines are significant. But I hope we can help folks think about these changes not just on like how can I spend the absolute least money. I
Yeah.
mean, like if you go to buy a new car, go to buy a car, for example, or I don't know, go to buy some clothes, or even go to buy some groceries. Most of us don't think about let's just find the absolute cheapest bargain basement thing. But for some reason, when it comes to these incredibly important machines that heat and cool our home and heat our water and provide comfort and safety and cooking for our families, we seem to have this bias towards like, oh, just get the cheapest damn thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, we can do better. We can do better for ourselves and our families by thinking about the totality of sort of costs and benefits. And when it comes to things like like insulation and air sealing, a lot of the benefits come in ways that are hard to measure with dollars. Your
Yeah.
home's going to be more comfortable. Your family's going to be happier. Your heater is going to be quieter. You're going to have a better experience. Can you put a dollar value on that? I don't know. Probably not. But you should put a value on it, I think, when you're thinking about making these changes, just like you already do when you're thinking about buying a new shirt or something for dinner. You're thinking about things beyond just, well, am I getting maximum return on my shirt investment, right?
Yeah. Um, one of the big complaints in sort of the like green building passive house world is that when folks are selling these homes or financing these projects, banks don't really like banks don't quantify a hyper insulated small house versus like a code built large house.
Mm,
Like the performance benefits of these homes are like measurable. Are you seeing anything in sort of like the real estate world? Because like a home is like the largest investment most people will ever make, um,
yeah.
and and they want to be assured, whether or not we can assure them, that they're investing in their home and like there is some financial benefit in the future.
Yes. Yes, of course, of course. Well, the benefit accrues from day one, right, in a more comfortable home and a safer home, and lower utility bills, but it also accrues there in the future in terms of home value. So there was some recent science done that showed in all parts of the country, to a greater or lesser extent, but always a positive effect of home electrification investments. They return more than 100% of their value in terms of improving home value. Now, it varies by location, and of course, it's going to vary by home. It's not always true, but things are heading in the right direction here. Home buyers are starting to value electrified homes higher than fossil gas homes. And you can understand why. I mean, the whole world is decarbonizing, and increasingly, if you try to sell somebody your home and it's filled with gas appliances, they will see it as this sort of legacy tax thing they need to address someday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like I'm sure decades ago, if you sold your home and it had a newfangled refrigerator in it, it was worth more than if you had to go buy ice blocks
Sure.
and put them in your ice chest, right? We're in a similar place now where not all agents and markets and homes are going to be valued higher because they've electrified, but the trend is absolutely going in that direction. And in some parts of the country, like certainly here where I am now in the San Francisco Bay Area, and also in California in general, we see coming in future years actual bans on the sale of gas appliances. Now, those bans don't mean that you have to change your gas appliances, but they do mean that after they go into effect, if your gas appliance fails, now you need to put in an electric one. Well, remember what we talked about before about how it can be difficult to electrify in a hurry? Of course, a home buyer that's buying a home that's already compliant with some future rule is going to feel much more satisfied
Mm-hmm.
with the quality of that home than if you're saddling them with the certainty that they will need to perhaps struggle a little bit to switch over from gas to electric in the future. It's starting to pay off, and I think that will just increase, especially as the real estate industry brings more attention to this. And we are starting to see that in some places. I heard the other day that Airbnb is starting to highlight that some of their vacation rentals are electrified or green. So we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming years, I'm certain.
The other thing that I think folks are really interested right now and is driving some of the electrification conversation are EVs. Um,
Yes.
and I think folks are keen. So I did a little bit of research on, the idea that like when should you convert to an EV, and essentially if your car is 10 years old or older, like you come ahead carbon footprint wise on an EV like very quickly. And
Yep.
so and 5% of the cars in the US last year sold were electric, and California's like 25%. It's
Yep.
like reaching this like adoption tipping point kind of thing. Um,
Yes.
like it feels like the wanting to get an EV or getting an EV is sort of like a catalyst for home electrification. Is that accurate?
It can be. It can be. So, what's happening with electric vehicles is that increasingly folks around America and around the world are realizing, are learning, are hearing from their friends, are experiencing themselves that electric cars are better, right? They're quieter, they're more comfortable, they're more performant, they're typically cheaper to own and operate, especially if you have benefit of perhaps solar at home or beneficial electricity rate plan. But even if you don't, just the operating cost, the maintenance cost for electric vehicles are lower. people are really starting to understand that electrified cars are better. What we're seeing now is that people are just starting to understand that electrified homes are better in similar ways, right? More comfortable and more performant and cheaper to operate. Now, getting an EV or thinking about getting an EV is absolutely part of folks thinking about electrifying the rest of their home, or at least it should be. We talked before about the challenge potentially down the road of doing a project in isolation. And here at QuitCarbon, we occasionally see this, especially with EV chargers. Someone's made the fine decision to go get an electric vehicle. That's awesome. I have electric cars, love them, would never go back. They're just fantastic. And then they realize, oh yeah, I need a charger at home. So they reach out to their local electrician, and putting in a charger is not difficult and relatively cheap. And the electrician comes and puts in a charger. But the electrician who puts in the charger isn't really thinking about your future heat pump water heater or induction stove or heat pump for space heating and cooling, or maybe your heat pump clothes dryer. And what they do is they put in an electric vehicle charger that's really big in terms of its amperage consumption. It's not big physically. EV chargers are small. They're like a little box like this, right? But this little box can use more than half of all the electricity that comes to your house from that little wire from the street, or at least that it comes to your house at a given moment, right? That's a lot of your home's entire electricity availability to allocate to one purpose, charging your car. And frankly, most people don't need big EV chargers because they're not driving that much, or if they are, they're at home overnight and they can charge for hours and hours. So one of the things that QuitCarbon does always is we make sure that the electric vehicle chargers that are going into a home are very considerate of all the other electrification needs. Well, even if you don't have a heat pump water heater yet, you're going to get one, and we want to make sure that you don't have to go redo work in the future. So we have all sorts of clever tricks, whether it's sizing the EV charger based on your driving habits in your car, or whether it's using an EV charger that can sense and respond to the other electrical demands in your home. It's important to make these pieces fit well together, which is why that plan that we talked about before is so important. But yeah, starting with electric vehicles, we do see a lot of our clients that we help, for free. A lot of them come to us saying, I started with an electric car. It's great. Now I want to have the same sorts of benefits in my home.
So one of the, pieces of pushback I get, especially when I talk about electrifying my home and heating it in Minnesota, is that, if everyone did this, our grid would not support it. And like my response is always like, well, the grid can't support what we're doing right now, and we're going to be investing in it and making improvements regardless of whether or not anyone electrifies.
That's right.
Like how would you respond to that pushback around the grid being unreliable or overtaxed and not able to handle electrification at a large scale?
Sure. So there's a few different responses here. So first of all, when we're talking with a homeowner about electrifying their home, let's remember it's their home. It's just theirs, right? We're not also simultaneously, though we wish we were, talking with 10,000 of their neighbors and everybody's going to do it tomorrow, right? This is a stepwise thing. For most folks, it's going to take years. So first thing is to say that the grid today cannot handle everybody electrifying today. It's like, well, yeah, of course not, but that's not going to happen. It's just the same as your grocery store today could not handle everybody going to it and buying a year's worth of groceries today. Well, obviously, but that's not going to happen. That's not how people behave. So prior to doing QuitCarbon, I spent 2.5 years working at PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, a large utility here in Northern California. PG&E is filled with smart, motivated, capable people who see exactly what's about to happen. It's already happening with electric vehicles, right? There's already growing electrical demand, especially in certain neighborhoods, especially in California, as you mentioned, where electric vehicles are a large share of new car sales. We're already seeing growth in electrical demand. And the utilities know exactly what's going on. They are in the business of making sure there is electricity for everybody today and tomorrow and years to come. And I have every confidence that they will do their jobs well and that we will have enough electricity. But there's a few other reasons I feel like we can be confident in this. We talked about the timing issue. This isn't all going to happen today. We talked about the smart people doing good work at utilities. Heck, even the name utility, right? What it means is something you can depend on, something that's always there. Are there electrical outages? Sure, there are. There always have been. There will be in the future. They happen. They often, for most people, much less frequent and shorter than people remember. Our memories are faulty, and we have this bias towards thinking, oh, God, it's so unreliable. It just ain't. The grid is pretty darn reliable, and will get even more so as investments are made into growing it. But there's one more important thing going on here, which is, these electrified appliances, these EV chargers, these heat pump water heaters, even to some extent heat pumps for space heating and cooling, especially if we're talking about things like solar and home batteries or electric vehicles with bidirectional capability. These are all things that can interact with the grid, right? In the future, increasingly, the grid, when it needs to, will tell the appliances in a given neighborhood, hey, people are kind of using a lot of electricity here. Maybe could you tone it down a little bit? And the EV charger in that neighborhood will slow its charging a little bit. Or the heat pump water heater in that neighborhood will reduce its heating because it's a big old tank full of hot water. Whether it heats it now or an hour from now, you're still going to have plenty of hot showers.
Yeah.
This interactivity is a real growing area that will start to make a very big difference in the future and will go a long way to improving the reliability of the grid and also the supply of electricity. Because another thing that's coming that we're especially excited about are bidirectional cars, right?
Yeah.
Home batteries, people have heard about them. They seem kind of cool. They're kind of expensive. And for most folks, like if you're doing a dollars and cents kind of thing, they're not really worth it. But cars that can act as home batteries are amazing. They're much larger than typical home batteries, and they're much cheaper, right? You get like a huge home battery with a free car, right? And in the near future, they will be able to put electricity back into your home in the case of a power outage, or even back into the local grid, for which you will get paid, probably handsomely. This sort of interactive, more dynamic grid of the future is part of why I have every confidence that our electrified world of the future, where we've moved off of fossil fuels, is going to be reliable, going to be safe, going to be affordable and comfortable for everybody. So I just have no reason to hesitate. I want to go forward as quickly as possible with confidence that all those other things are also moving forward quickly with smart, motivated people making them happen.
Great. Well, Cooper, I appreciate you so much for taking some time to talk with us today. If folks want to learn more about QuitCarbon, what should they do?
Yeah, come on over to the website. We're QuitCarbon, QUIT, carbon.com. You can chat with us there. You can sign up for our free service. When you do so, we'll offer to schedule a time to have a call with you if you just want to speak with us and ask some questions. Whether you're a homeowner or a renter, whether you're in California or elsewhere, we encourage you to sign up. If we can't help you today, we'll try to help you find folks that can, right? We talked before about other organizations like ours that help folks navigate the process of electrifying affordably. Also, if you're not sure how you're going to afford these changes in your home, I encourage you to also sign up. The rebates are incredible. They're big and getting bigger. The financing options are also in some places really amazing, with 0% loans available in some cases. Electrification can be free, right? We're not talking about huge premium expenses. So I encourage folks to just start, make that plan, start on your journey. Everyone's going to proceed at a different pace, and that's totally okay. But all of us starting will bring us all to a better place in the future. And QuitCarbon.com is a great place to do that.
Each week, we take some time to answer questions from listeners. Kelsey, you've got one for us this week.
I do. So this one comes from Max, and his question is around using a wood stove to heat your house. Is that an environmentally friendly choice? What are the things to consider there? I don't know the answer to this.
I actually was part of a team that worked on an article for Fine Home Building, specifically about installing a wood stove in a new house. And that was one of the questions we asked ourselves. And if you're looking for a simple answer, the question is no. It is not environmentally friendly to heat your home by burning wood.
Okay, short answer, no. Long answer.
So short answer, you're basically taking the carbon that's been stored in that wood and throwing it right back up into the atmosphere.
Sure.
It's also not great from like an air quality standpoint, all those sorts of things.
Right.
But when you're thinking of totally electrifying your home, especially when you're in a place that gets cold, having a reliable source of backup heat can be an important part of the equation.
Right.
You can get there with like large battery installations, and some solar power. You can get like a fossil fuel powered generator. Or if you have access to some land and some wood, a wood stove is a good way to keep your house warm in an emergency situation.
Sure, that makes sense. I have been without heat in Chicago in the winter, and it is an emergency situation. So I like thinking about it like that as a good backup energy source if you need it.
And then also, like folks speak like trying to change habits. Like there is something nice about a nice warm wood stove in a cabin when it's cold and having a cup of apple cider, maybe a little whiskey in there, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like totally a vibe. And, we're not here to like harsh anyone's vibes about wood stoves. But if you're thinking about like using a wood stove to heat your home all year long, there are much more environmentally friendly ways to do it. That said, when you buy a new wood stove, they are rated by the EPA, and the EPA has pretty like stringent standards around wood stoves, specifically how they're installed and how they can get them to burn the most cleanly. Like for instance, you should only burn hardwoods in a wood stove. Inside, you should never burn softwoods like pine or cedar.
Okay.
Hardwoods
Too bad. The smell is so much nicer.
I mean, it just all smells like burning, right? Like,
yeah, I guess so.
And then the other part about having a wood stove, especially in a new home build where your home is probably more sealed and insulated than, the old family cabin, is you want to be conscious of makeup air. And so like a fire, in order for it to burn, it needs airflow. And controlling that airflow is like how you control how well it burns, all that sort of stuff. But in a very tight home, having a wood stove like just adds a little bit of complexity to the installation.
Right. So it really depends on what home we're talking about. It's a pretty different question when you're thinking about that family cabin out in the woods versus a new home in a city or something. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm glad to hear the EPA is regulating the new wood stove. So if you are making that choice, it's at least going to be on the best end of that.
Yeah. And, I will say, like, if you're living in a city, having a wood stove for backup heat probably isn't like the best thing. I know, and especially in cities, like it's like installing a wood stove, like there's some hoops you have to jump through to get it permitted.
Sure.
I think also like there's some insurance things. I've always had this vision of having a wood shop in my backyard, and during the winter I heat it with scraps for my projects that like didn't work out. But like in Minneapolis, there's no way they will let you install a wood stove.
Absolutely not. Absolutely
like
not.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But if you're somewhere more remote where, help could be a couple of days away, at the end of a long road, at the end of an electricity line, wood stove makes a lot of sense as like a backup heat for sure.
Okay. So, Max, the short answer is no, it's not environmentally friendly, but the longer answer is there are instances in which it might make sense. So, not a hard no, a soft no.
Special thanks to Kelsey for joining me and our guest Cooper Marcus for the great interview, and Max, of course, for sending in a question. And all of you for listening. To see the show notes, send feedback, and learn more about Smart Energy, visit ohmconnect.com/smartenergy. Stay safe, conserve some energy, and we'll see you next time.